the president of GLAAD, which
monetizing
is
hate.
an activism organization for LGBT people, just did an interview with Variety to say that we need a watershed moment for trans representation in Hollywood projects. And they believe that this has been accomplished for lesbian, gay, and bisexual representation through Ellen DeGeneres coming out or Will and Grace, but that still hasn't happened for the trans community. They said, what we don't have yet is a watershed moment for the trans community. I see this as an opportunity, as a chance to speak to the Academy and all the creators in the room to say that we need that moment. We need you to create and write about trans people because there were over 500 anti-LGBTQ bills proposed this year, and most are against trans people and our trans youth. I don't know how this is going to fit into their idea that you should only write about your own experience, because only 0.1% of the population is identifying as trans at this point.
When I mentioned the story to Mary, she goes, "Why is a trash bag company?" Was that you? That I mentioned the story.
I did not say that.
I mentioned the story to someone, and they said, like, "Why is a trash bag company care about?"
Oh, yeah.
That's like it's a different GLAAD.
Well, they are also a trash bag company,
yes.
So. We got a $22 super chat from Lars Ja, 1993. I don't know if I said that right. Hello from the Netherlands. You're an international show. Time zones suck, though. Got some wise words for us?
Phil, wise words?
For the Netherlands?
For the Netherlands?
Don't get them wet. Don't feed them after midnight.
Well, it's the Netherlands, so make sure you know how to swim. You know, there's a lot of the Netherlands are below sea level, so... You know, make sure you know how to swim and
assisted suicide is bad.
Do they have that there?
Yeah.
Don't do Canada shit. Like there you go. That's the second thing. Don't do if Canada's doing it.
Don't
avoid it.
They're the precursor to the
Canada
program.
is the canary in the coal mine.
No, I think the Netherlands was the canary in the coal mine for
there was
for
one
Canada.
country did it way before Canada.
I think
they had like the suicide pods.
But anyway, yeah, they did. Yeah. So. Also, they added that apparently 30% of Americans personally know a trans person, someone who identifies as trans.
Don't buy it.
That stat seems weird to me. I don't believe that's real.
I know two people that are, but only, like people that I know through social media. And then obviously we've met and interacted multiple times with Blair White, but I don't know if that's necessarily the same thing.
I don't think that counts.
Being like friends with somebody that you see on a regular basis.
Well, they said 30% of Americans personally know someone who identifies as trans, which means that the remaining 70% of Americans need to be educated through the media they consume about the trans experience.
This is where I come back to my point that I made yesterday, which is I think I'm going to start harping on this one more and more, that now, like, rather than defining woke, it is just Christian movies for the left. Yeah. Focus on message, less and a whole lot less on the actual entertainment value. If your first goal is to educate me on something, you've already lost and you've already failed to do your job correctly.
What's taking up that space in the media right now are political pundits who are talking about trans people with misinformation and in negative ways. We need Hollywood to be the antidote to that.
If you're ever wondering whether they actually see themselves as tastemakers and the people who they believe should be guiding you, this tells you everything they need to know.
This is insane. I will be really happy when we are in every story, because we are in every family, we are in every workplace. I don't mean that we need to be the center of every story, but I don't know a family in America or a workplace or restaurant or really anywhere in America where there aren't LGBTQ people.
I mean, that sounds like
that's
a lack
bogus.
It also sounds like somebody who's not able to understand a world outside of their own view. Right?
If we were like, oh, well, look at this family, there are no gay people or trans people in this family, they'll be like, oh, but one of them is closeted.
Yeah. Also, they say that they don't have to be the main character, but then they will write an article about how the character isn't given enough time and how the character should be focused on more. And we just had to suffer through an entire speech from America Ferrera the other day talking about how they need to make more movies for women that show them as full characters. What does that even mean?
This woman has been the president of GLAAD for 10 years as of this year, and she says she's frequently asked when she will be happy with the level of LGBTQ representation in media, and she said, never. Literally, that's a quote.
She's honest.
The activist in her wants to shout, never.
The $20 one from Not That Jon Stewart says, don't do Canadian shit. Phil Labonte, 2024.
It's solid advice.
Yes.
I like that. I think I stand behind that.
Maybe we should make a shirt for that for PCC. Jessica, are you watching right now? Can we get a shirt that says "Don't do Canadian shit"?
I want to see less LGBTQ representation in media.
Yeah.
That's my goal. I'm going to avoid that as much as possible.
Also, it said that there was that 5.4% of characters on television right now are trans. According to Pew Research, 5% of the youth are trans, which technically means that you're overrepresented.
Yeah, they're
Which means
overrepresented.
5% of the youth are falling victim to a social contagion that they found on the internet.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean anything about them other than they shouldn't have been allowed on TikTok.
Getting rid of Tumblr was a terrible idea.
Should have left them all sequestered on Tumblr.
Should have left them alone.
I do appreciate her saying the quiet part out loud, never. And this is actually true, right? Because as you've heard a million times before, if you're an activist group, if you're some sort of organization that's championing a cause, you put yourself out of business when you solve the problem.
Yep.
Therefore, it is in your best interest for that problem to continue so you can continue making money, so you can continue having these lame dinners and award shows where you all jerk each other off and tell one another how awesome you are. Mm-hmm. And so nobody actually wants to solve the problem. It's like expecting a politician to want to solve the problem.
Yep.
It's unrealistic and stupid. Mm-hmm. And what I think, more than anything, is that you should be paying writers that are actually talented a premium to write nuanced stories about these characters, because you could possibly make people hate you less if you didn't have to shoehorn everything in a way that felt so ham-fisted.
Look, I don't hate trans people just because I don't want them to be in my TV shows. I mean, where does that correlate to bigotry?
I'm just saying, for the average person who's not part of the culture war and doesn't know nor care, you do yourself a good deed by writing stories that engage with people and just make it a character that happens to be trans in a great story rather than a story about a trans character.
It is psychologically disturbing to look at someone who has been on hormone replacement therapy. It psychologically disturbs me and repels me. Like, that is not something that your brain can compute. I do not enjoy that. And I do not want to consume stories about that.
Yeah. It was interesting. I loved the show Elementary, which was it was a Sherlock Holmes show in name only. Barely correlates. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Barely correlates to Sherlock Holmes. But in the show, they race and gender swap Watson. They race and gender swap Watson. They gender swap Moriarty, and they made Mrs. Hudson a trans character. And somehow it wasn't awful because it got mentioned all of once the first time she was on screen and then never mentioned again. And with the other characters, it just wasn't harped on. The story was somewhat interesting despite the fact that the characters had been raced and gender swapped. You can do these things in a way that works. You're just not doing it properly, and that is not the audience's fault.
I disagree. I don't think there's any way to do it right.
Because
it's contrived every time.
We can get into
the goal is the same regardless of the execution.
We can get it and then we get into the subjectivity of the art and whatnot.
Because look, if you acknowledge that trans people exist, you are still ceding ground to the entire lie. You cannot do that. You cannot give them an inch because they will take a mile.
I'm not arguing from I'm trying to argue in favor of how, I would imagine if I was to give them advice on how to not make people hate you while still promoting your cause, this would be the way to do it. What I like, how I feel about it actually doesn't super play into it, because when I do see these characters, I'm judging on whether the storytelling is done in an interesting way that doesn't make me focus on those elements, right? The same way when we talk about race and gender swapped characters, you can do that. You just have to have a way to do it that isn't so annoying to everyone. And they fail 95% of the time.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to give them advice on how to maybe drop that to 90% of the time so that people hate you a little less.
They won't
I promise they're not going to listen to you.
I'm not
Brett.
saying they will. I'm just I'm shouting into the void here.
Yeah, you are.
I'm shouting into the void as someone who I think wants to, and I understand it's not naivete per se, but like most of the time, I can appreciate good art no matter what, even if I disagree with it ideologically, but the art isn't good.
But you're not really recognizing that there's something ideological about every race swap. There's something ideological behind every gender swap. There is an ideological goal behind every story that is made about a trans person. So you cannot do that without it being ideological propaganda.
I'm not saying that it's. I mean,
It's
I believe
literally
that
impossible.
Almost all the entertainment we're seeing is propaganda in some way, shape, or form. Anyways, I'm looking for the stories a way to. Okay, let's rephrase it. This is how I want to save myself from being annoyed every time I watch something on these shows. Is to have them write it better. I was watching. I was looking at Dallas Saulnier's breakdown of the new season of True Detective. And he's talking about how awful it is, and everything that he mentioned on why it's so bad was like an easily fixable thing. And they can't do it because they don't have the guts to hire the writers that they should, because when they do that, they get told that they're either hiring the wrong people, because they should be writing people to tell authentic stories, people who don't know how to tell stories about anything other than their own experience, rather than a universally told story that can appeal to everyone.
It's better to tell good stories than telling authentic stories poorly. Because if you tell,
that's a good way of putting it.
You can tell like good stories well or authentic stories poorly.
Yeah.
You need to go with the good stories well.
And just because the story is authentic doesn't mean it resonates to enough people that are going to means that they're going to want to watch it anyways. So, and all of these are moot points anyways, because when Hollywood is doing all of its casting by checkbox filling, and you want to win an Oscar, you have to meet a bunch of demographic requirements. Is that a recipe for good art anyways? No, it's not. So I may be shouting into the void, but the point of this show is to share my, the point is for us to share our opinions on it. So, I don't know.
Yes.
Mary's like, she's just not making it.
Yeah. Mary's like, just outlaw them.
Yeah.
Not outlaw it, outlaw them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel represented right now because you said that. I feel affirmed.
Perfect.
I feel heard, seen, and validated.
I know what you want, Mary.
Thanks for watching. Listen to full episodes of Pop Culture Crisis on Spotify.
Keep up with us on social media and make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the show. Bye, guys.